Say, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bill Ward with Bill Ward Life, the Bill Ward Life podcast, formerly the UDRCast. I'm gonna go slowly and phase out the UDRCast. I don't know what it's gonna look like on Spotify and the other platforms. Maybe Bill Ward Life podcast, formerly the UDRCast, so some people can slowly get in line with that. So yeah, I'm back behind the mic and the camera today to do another talk. I've been thinking a lot about what I wanted to talk about, and kind of what came to me was, there's a lot of stories that have taught me a lot of lessons in my journey. When I say stories, I mean my own lived experience of seemingly making mistakes. To a lot of other people, they thought they were mistakes. I thought they were mistakes. But really what I've learned is these mistakes were experiences that I needed to learn and grow from. And through those processes of building some strength and fortitude and character out of these experiences, I've healed a lot, and I've been able to open up my world in different ways. And one of my big beliefs is as you heal, the universe opens up new pathways for you. And, while I was going through a lot of these experiences, it was like severe pain. It was like some of the worst pain that I could ever have imagined. And, I still go through it today once in a while. The big difference, I guess, today is, I'm able to navigate these things with a lot less stress, and it doesn't take me right out. So, that's kind of where we're at with that. And I think where I'm going to start is, kind of what it looked like along the journey of when I was 22 years old and I first quit drinking. So when I was 22, I finally had enough of that first phase of my alcoholism where it was destroying me in every single way. I was very lonely and afraid and didn't know what was happening. I couldn't save money. I could barely live. I couch surfed, and alcohol was really destroying my life. And, maybe 5-6 years prior, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But it didn't take long for it to really, really catch up with me and do some damage. And I got to that point where I wanted to stop, but I couldn't stop. And eventually, I was at work one day, and I used to work seismic. And seismic, that job itself, like it promoted drinking and drug using. So, I could drink and use every night, and, as long as I showed up to work, that was the way that it was. And as long as I could put in a good day's work, which I always did, no one would really say boo. But eventually, I got fired, and then I didn't have a job, and I wanted to stop. So I got this one little survey job where I went up north with my mom's boyfriend because he kind of felt sorry for me. So he gave me a job, and I had some survey experience. So I went up north with him, and I was in the town of Bonnyville, and I had went out that night, and I just got hammered, and I woke up in the wrong hotel. And I looked out the side door of the hotel at like 6 a.m. I was like, where the hell am I? And then I ended up stumbling my way back to my hotel. I snuck into bed because, my mom's boyfriend, he was sleeping at the time, and he would have given me shit if he knew that I was out all night, and, he knows that I needed to work, and I just didn't need that. So I just tiptoed in quietly. I crawled under the covers with my clothes on, and I just pretended like I was sleeping, and then the alarm went off, and then we got up, and he got ready, I got ready, and I basically just had to put my boots on and head out to the truck. So that's what I did. And I remember sitting in the front seat of his Jeep, and I was just hurting, man, and I just wanted it all to end. And I was kind of against prayer and against God. I didn't really think about God or pray or anything because I did go to Catholic school, and this is nothing against Catholicism or church or those kind of schools, but it really put a sour taste in my mouth, and I wasn't really down for that, and I didn't really believe much of that bullshit. And I call it bullshit because that was my perception at the time. Today I have a different take on it. But anyway, then I'm sitting in the truck and I'm just hurting, and I just started praying. And I'm like, holy fuck, please, God, if you are out there, stop this. I don't want to drink anymore, please. And, I remember finishing off that day of work, and it's probably 4:00 in the afternoon, and I'm like, I should go have a drink. And I'm battling in my head going, no, bro, you said that you weren't going to drink. And I didn't want to drink. But I was going to go to the bar anyway. So because I was working with him, I went to the bar by myself, and I ate dinner, and I remember I saw a couple, hotties at the pool table playing pool, and that was an invitation for me to play pool. And I remember thinking, if one of these girls wants me to drink and I got a chance of getting laid from one of them, I'm definitely drinking. And so I was playing pool, and, sure enough, I had no signs and they weren't hitting on me. And so thank God, because if they did, I would have drank and probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But I white knuckled it through that night, and I made it the next day. And that was the first time that I intentionally was able to kind of get 24 hours when I really didn't want to drink. And then from there, I got another 24 hours. And then from there, the next thing you know, I'm like 6 months sober. And being 6 months sober without my medicine, which is the booze, I'm pretty fucking miserable, pretty restless. And, it was now springtime, summertime, and I went back to my old jobs. I asked my boss, I begged my boss for one of the old jobs that I used to have back. And he had actually let me go back when I was like 18 because of my drinking. But he knew I was a good hard worker and I wasn't drinking, and I convinced him that I wouldn't be drinking, and so he hired me on. And I started working for this trenching company again, putting in gas pipelines in the city of Calgary. And, I'm just working away and doing my thing, and everything's going good. Some of my old friends were still there, and we're bonding, but I'm still pretty mad, still pretty miserable, man. And then one day we're cruising around in the work truck, and I saw these guys doing this one job. It was burning coal. One of the contractors was using coal to light on fire, and they would lay it on the ground. It went on thaw the ground. But they had like these big, huge dump truck loads of coal, and they didn't know how to light it. They didn't know what they were doing. And I would see this here and there all over. And what we were doing at that time is we were running what they called the burn truck. And the burn truck was a small gravel truck, and we would load up hay bales in it, and we would load it with coal. And we would find these sites where they were going to run the gas line to the house. And so we would spread hay like a half a meter wide all the way from the corner of the house, maybe 10 feet off the corner, because we didn't want to catch the house on fire. And then we would run it all the way back to the gas main, and then on top of the straw we would lay coal. And then we would take our pack of matches and walk along the edge of the straw and throw matches on the ground, and the straw would light on fire. And then once the straw lit on fire, it would smolder into the coal, and then the coal would start burning, and then we would cover it with these barrels that they cut in half. But they weren't really covering the whole burn. They were covering like little pieces of the burn. And then we would put more barrels over the gas main so that the gas main could unthaw, because it's you want to be able to dig that ground softly. So anyway, I saw this kind of going on, and I'm like, why isn't someone doing that for a business? And the more I drove around, the more I could see people, these other businesses trying to burn coal and didn't have a good method, and they didn't know what they were doing. And so I had this brainwave idea that I was going to burn coal for a living. So I went and bought this old piece of shit dump truck off of the side of 32nd Ave. It was a 1976 GMC 3-ton, had holes in the floor. No one would give me any money for it, so I went and got a 36% loan on $5,000. So I bought this thing for $5,000, 36% loan. And then I decided I was going to start this company. So I went and talked to my boss and said, yeah, I'm going to start a company doing this coal thawing thing like we do for you, but I'm going to go do it as a business. And he's like, what the hell are you thinking? He's like, I just gave you a good job. Like, just do your job and never mind the bullshit thinking and just kind of fall in line. And I'm just like, oh, okay. But that's not how I am. So I kept working there. And then eventually I asked my boss, I said, okay, well, I am going to leave and I'm going to do this. And so do you need any barrels cut? And because I want to use your torches and cut my own barrels. And so I cut his barrels for free and I cut mine. And I spent my hard-earned money that I was making working for him on these barrels. And I would cut them all in half. And then I would stack them. And I didn't have any work yet. And then eventually I went and knocked on his competitor's door, Direct Competition's door. And they were a new company. And they were like, yeah, because they knew me. And so we came up with a price. And the next thing you know, I started burning these fires around Calgary, dealing with the fire department, had insurance. And, I started a company called Ward's Ground Thaw Services, which is really funny because the logo that I designed for that company is it's an oval with an X through it. So it's almost the exact sign of a medicine wheel, except in an oval shape. And each color of that oval, one was blue, one was orange, one was red, and one was green. And it was for the 4 seasons of the year is why I picked those colors. But, I guess to precede a story that might come down the pipe later is like I had no inclination of my culture. I didn't want to be Native or Indian. And I had no influence of that. My Indian side of my family was all distributed and broken up, and my dad had never really taken part in his family because he wanted to get sober, and he was sober, so he had to kind of abandon his family because they weren't sober. But I guess, inherently in my being and my blood, I picked a medicine wheel as my logo for my first business. And as I started that business, I got that one contract and things went well. And that first winter I made like $60K. And I was like, holy shit, I made a lot of money. And I went and bought this really nice little 1984 pickup truck, 4x4, a little hot rod. And then the next year, the season was starting and I wanted to try to get busier and do more. And so I decided I was going to go knock on the door of the largest construction company, utility construction company in Alberta. They were an electrical company called Ace Construction. And so I went and talked to like one of the main guys at that company. He was running the whole place, and my hair's probably down to the middle of my back. I wear a ponytail. I'm young. I'm like 24 years old, and I go knock on this guy's door and I tell him, hey, I want to be able to do this for you guys. What do you think? He's like, looks at me kind of like strange, like, all right. He listened and he said, I'm going to make a meeting with you and some of the other guys. And so he set up this meeting and, I just pitched it and I sold it. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing yet. I hadn't developed the whole system, but I had one season in. And, the next step was I was going to go knock on the ATCO Gas CEO's door. And he had this big office down in Winnipeg. And so I go down there one day and I go into the main reception and I say, hey, I want to talk to so-and-so. And they're like looking at me like, who is this Native guy walking in here wanting to talk to the big head honcho who everyone kind of caters to? Anyway, the guy let me come in and I pitched it to him. A month later, ATCO hired me. Next thing you know, I'm working for the two of the largest construction companies, ATCO Gas and Ace Construction. And then shortly after that, TELUS came along and Shaw came along, the city of Calgary came along, and I was really rocking and I was doing some crazy good work, and I made a lot of mistakes with that work, but I was sober, I had some passion, I had some drive, and things were going okay. I had no idea how to price anything out. I remember my first pricing job, I just kind of made up this thing called spot burns. This is a spot burn and this is how big it is, and it's around this big. And so when I was doing my first invoice, I just priced it out as like 8 spot burns, and each one was like $80. They were $80 each. And then so one of the main supervisors said, well, how big's a spot burn? And I'm like, well, about this big. He's like, well, you don't have a unit of measurement? You don't have I'm like, no, it's just like about this big. He's like, okay, well, I would do the estimates and they would be like, how many spot burns is this? And I'd be like, I don't know. I'd say 10. And then so I'd lay out 10 spot burns and charge them $800. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing. But eventually I started figuring it out. I started charging by the square meter and linear meter, and I was doing a really good job. And from there I got into glycol boilers, and from there I got into radiant heaters, and from there I got into land reclamation, because from my good reputation as a ground thawer, and I had all the equipment, I got asked by TELUS and ATCO to do land reclamation. And then next thing you know, I'm doing land reclamation. I'm contracted to a large construction company, landscape company in Calgary, and I didn't know what I was doing. And, my point to these pieces of the conversation is, a lot of the things that I've done where people thought you can't do them. And I just did what I thought was right, and I just had the balls to talk to these people. And what I've learned along the way is people are people. And if people are truly in alignment with humanity and who they are, and and you bring them some value, and there's a good return on investment, and you're an integral person, people really feel that. And so over all these years, I'm not afraid to really talk to anybody anymore, and haven't been for a long, long time. And you miss 100% of the chances that you don't take. And so I took all these chances and I made these risks, and I had no experience. I don't have grade 11. And, I built a pretty successful construction company. I ended up buying a nice $1 million house, and, had some nice vehicles and trailers and boats. And, through all of this, though, my anger was still really prevalent. A lot of my anger from my youth and my early 20s was prevalent. And, I'd met Shannon and my wife at the time, and we had the girls, and, a lot of our lives through me building this business was I was a workaholic. And basically I'm just treating my untreated alcoholism and addiction with workaholism. And, the underlying issues that drive it are still anger and, greed and insecurity and all these types of things. And those are the same things that drove me to drink, but now they're driving me to make money, and it's more socially accepted, so it's okay. And, and my family's well taken care of it. So, and this is what everyone does. And so I just keep going, and, I build this business, and things went well, at least from the outside, although my anger and some of my disconnection within myself was still there. And I remember, a few of my employees, I ended up hiring employees along the way. If they pissed me off too bad, I had no problem grabbing them by the scruff of the neck, throwing them on the ground, and, putting my fist right in their face, throwing them up against the fence, and, choking them out and saying, if you ever, make me look bad like that again, I'll fucking kick your ass, or, whatever. I had no issues with grabbing somebody physically and threatening them. And that included driving with my family and road raging and pulling the car over, or getting in high-speed chases, and, getting out of my car and grabbing someone out of their car, and doing this in front of my family, high-speed chases with my daughters beside me going, Daddy, what are you doing? This is scary. And I'm just raging. And this was a lot of my sober life, building this business, and, the family walking on eggshells and these kind of things. But, I always had enough money to make it all right. And, my ex-wife Shannon kind of, fell into the trap, I guess you could say, of sometimes relationships you fall into the abusive traits of your partner, and she fell into hers. And so, I never hurt her physically, but I'm sure I hurt her emotionally and mentally. And and didn't really think anything of it. Why? Because everyone's doing the same thing. I could say, oh, this is what my wife did to my buddy, and my buddy's like, oh, I would have said the same thing. And I'm constantly getting all my bad behaviors validated as I build this business and I live my life. And the point is I'm still pretty spiritually sick as I do this. But money seems to make it okay. And as long as you have money, people are more accepting of that because everyone wants a piece of your money. And so as I kind of kept going through this, I got to a point probably, maybe about 13 years in where the business wasn't really doing it for me anymore. And I was really focused on the money part of it now, and the passion that I had kind of dwindled away. I'm now in the office. My crews are working, but my passion isn't there, but I still want money. So I'm doing it. And eventually, as an addict alcoholic, the things that seem to work for quite some time, they don't continue to work. And so my alcohol worked until it didn't work. Workaholism works until it doesn't work. Money works until it doesn't work. Like many things work until they don't work. And eventually I need relief in some other way, shape, or form. I ended up getting a call from my dad, and he asked me, hey, do you want to come with me out to Winnipeg? Your brother's a missing person. And I had nothing to do with my brother because he was a drug addict. And, years earlier, he had moved to Winnipeg so he could use and whatever. And so it's not like I hated him or anything, but I just didn't want that in my life. So I made this decision to keep him out of my life. And, I look back today and I judged him hard. Like I had hard judgments on my brother and, didn't want anything to do with him, didn't want him part of the family, but I would let Shannon and the girls do whatever if they needed to with him because I didn't want to not allow them to have some type of relationship with him. I just made that choice mostly for me. And so I said, yeah, Dad, I'll go help you look for Dan. So my dad doesn't fly. I did fly. So I flew to Winnipeg. I got a rental car, and my dad ended up driving his own car. And we met up in Winnipeg. But the day that I got there, I started looking for him first. I had some pictures of him, and I went downtown, first place I went. And I started showing the bar people, the servers and the bartenders and different homeless people. And I'm showing the picture, asking if they've seen my brother. And no one had seen my brother. I just kept on it, kept asking. And then eventually this one homeless kind of guy said, yeah, I think I recognize him, and I think I even know where he is. And so I got this guy to jump in my rental car and take me to where he thought he was. And we went up into the north end of Winnipeg, and it's a pretty shady part of Winnipeg. And we get out at this house, and we go up to this house, and we open the door and go in, and there's another guy there. And Buddy, who I'm with, explains kind of why we're there, and because he was pretty skeptical. And then he's like, okay, well, I don't know if he is here or not, but it was like a trap house, right? It was a crack house. But I could look for him, but I had to smoke some crack if I wanted to look for him. And I didn't really know what crack was at the time. And I wasn't really worried because I knew I wasn't a hard drug user, and I wasn't using alcohol or anything. I was pretty much straight other than weed and a little bit of mushrooms here and there. So I call that straight. Anyway, they passed me this pipe and put a rock in it and, light it up and make me smoke it, three hoots or whatever. And, I did it. Can't really remember exactly what I felt, but I remember they allowed me to look through the rest of the house and see if my brother was there, and he wasn't there. So we leave. I drop Buddy back off downtown, and my dad shows up the next day, and we go look for him. We couldn't find him. And then eventually we saw the car, because we knew the car that he had. He had a rental car, and we saw this rental car with the license plate that was his. And I don't know how we had the license plate number. And we ended up calling the cops and saying we found this car. but we don't know who's driving. It was on the side of the road. Like, what are the odds of that, eh? In the city of Winnipeg, you find the car your brother was renting, but he's not with it. And so the cops find this car, and they find the people who are in the car later. And then they called us and let us know that my brother had sold this car that wasn't his. It was a rental car for crack. And so it was these two girls that had this car, something like that. Anyway, so we did find him because the girls let us know where he was, let the cops know. And the cops went there and found him, and then they told us to come. And so we went there, and I saw my brother and, tried to get him the help that he needed. And then from there, me and my dad took off back to Calgary. And, I'm back in Calgary, and all I can feel is like, I feel like I want to buy crack, smoke crack. And I don't smoke crack, never bought in crack. And this is just a battle going on in my head. And I'm like, what the hell? And in 12-step recovery, what had actually happened was when I took the hoots of crack from the guys that were running that house, it set off the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind in me, but I didn't understand that. All I knew is I was back in Calgary and I wanted to smoke crack, and I couldn't even believe it. And I'm like, in my own head, I'm like, bro, you don't even smoke crack. Like, what the fuck would you want to do that for? And I'm like, I don't know. And I kept trying to push it away. But eventually I needed it. And 2 weeks of this battle in my head, I got a family, I got a business, I got all these things going on. Like, the last thing I should be doing is seeking out crack and smoking crack, but that's what I wanted to do. And so I did. After, 2 weeks, I succumbed to that desire, and I found some, and I just smoked it by myself, and I was just like, wow, this is the best shit ever. This is the best shit ever. I've been looking for this all my whole fucking life, man. And I just was like in cloud nine. I just fucking loved it. And, and then from that moment on, fucking lies and deceit and shit just started like being part of my life. And I was hiding it, and I was, sneaking it. And, at first it was just a little tiny bit that would last me a long time. And, I could even be social on it, and I could do regular things, and they were enhanced actually. And then after like a year, I started feeling a little bit different about it, but I still wanted it, and I was still being sneaky and running my business while I'm like running my crews on the two-way radios while I'm in a set of bushes fucking smoking rock and trying to guide these guys. And they were self-sufficient, so it was fairly simple, but I still needed to be a boss. And by, year maybe 3, I was fucking hooked. And like things were falling apart. And I didn't really know how to stop, and I sure didn't think I couldn't stop yet. I wasn't really there. I'm just looking back, but at the time I thought I could still manage it. And then, the 4th year, I'm pretty hooked, man. And I'm missing mortgage payments. I'm missing this. I'm missing that. My company is slowly disintegrating, and I'm basically losing my company. And then eventually I lost it. And then, Shannon's like, why is the mortgage payment not paid? And I had every excuse in the book, and I'm selling equipment, and I'm fucking sticking like, so much of that shit in the pipe and just blowing money like mad. And because Shannon and I had like a old traditional type deal relationship where I'm the man, I deal with the money, I'll give you the money and you do what you need to do for the house and for the kids. And I quit giving her the money, and so she was getting concerned, and but I would always be able to steal her mad and be more angry than her. And so I just, did what I wanted. And eventually we did lose it. And then I had to get a job, and I got that first job, and I worked out of town for a reputable company, and I made a lot of money, like $8,000 a month, and I wouldn't send her any money. And she was like hurting, and right in this process, we're losing the house because I can't make the payments, but I am making enough to make the payments and to get caught up, but I'm smoking so much, and I'm showing up at work fucking high as a kite, and like I don't even know what's going on, and I can't stop it all. And then another job opportunity comes at like I was making $8,000 a month. That one, the next one offered me $20,000 a month. And so I took that, and, I started out in Calgary. I had to do a piss test. So I needed 30 days clean to get through that piss test. And I white knuckled that. But the day of the piss test, within probably an hour of that piss test, I was fucking high again. And I also had an insurance meeting because I had fucked up my insurance that we paid for 15 years. I had multiple life insurance policies, and I quit paying them. And then once I got this other job back, we kind of got things in alignment, but they wanted another physical and a piss test and shit. And I went and pissed dirty at the piss test, and so they denied us all of the reinstatements of all the insurance policies, and we paid thousands. They were worth millions of dollars, these policies. And so I lost all that, and Shannon's just like devastated, and she doesn't know I'm smoking crack at this time. And eventually it all came to a head, and something happened on the job site, and they piss tested me, and I come home, and the organization who does the drug testing calls me and said, yeah, you tested. And I was with Shannon. I was driving with her. I remember the drugs that you tested positive for were marijuana and cocaine, they said. And I was with her, and she was listening, and I said, okay, thank you. So I hung up, and she's like, what'd they say? And I said, I tested positive for marijuana, so the company's canning me. And so she was devastated, but I didn't tell her about the cocaine, eh? And then, so we were kind of hanging on, and I was renting a $5,000 acreage somewhere else because I'd already been in the process of losing the old house, but I still had enough money with this new job to rent an acreage for $5,000 a month. And that's where the girls and Shannon were living. And we were in chaos though, because of all of my shenanigans. Like, nothing was stable, and our relationship was not stable. I wasn't being a good dad. Fucking nothing was stable. And eventually, one night at that house, and don't know what I'm doing. I'm not making any money, and I don't know how I'm going to pay any rent. And me and Shannon got in a fight. Me and one of my daughters actually got in our first fight, my oldest daughter, Lila. And then she had kind of covered for her mom in a lie. And I got so mad at them both, and I was just like, fuck this, I'm out of here. I don't even want to be part of this family anymore. And I fucking packed up all my bag and a cot. I had a cot, and I threw it in the back of and by now I'm driving like a $700 beater fucking vehicle. I packed it all in the back of that beater, and I left at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I didn't even know where I was going. And Shannon was like, where are you going to go? And I'm like, I don't know, it's men's shelter or something. And I didn't even know if there was a men's shelter. I didn't even know anything about that world. So I just drove. But then on my drive away, I remembered, I'm like, oh, my old house. Oh, the renovators are there renovating it for the bank and from the flood and blah, blah, blah. And I still know the door code, and it's kind of still ours a little bit. And so I went to that house, and I found out it was the same door pad key unlocked the door. So I went in, and I slept in there and smoked crack in the dark, but for like a few days. And then I had to get out of there, and I had nowhere to live. And by now, Shannon and I were not talking barely, but I asked her if I could borrow the trailer that was at the other house, because she owned it. She owned the boat and the trailer because they were in her name. So I couldn't smoke those in the crack pipe. And she loved me, but she was mad at me. So she said, yeah, take the trailer. And so I took the trailer, I put it at the foreclosed property, and that's where I lived. And I lived in that trailer for, I don't know. So my sober date from crack cocaine is March 22nd, 2015. I lost my job in February, deteriorated till March, probably bumped out of that house that I rented with the family, probably March 15th or something. And then I spent a week living in that house smoking crack, and then I got the trailer, and, right around March 22nd, I quit smoking crack and started living in the trailer. And I think I even was smoking some crack while I was living in that trailer. But anyway, I just had no money. I had nothing. And I wasn't in touch with my family, and I was just smoking weed for sure, if I had any. and I'm pretty sure I was smoking some crack in there, and I was just dying. I, would get a little bit of money. I'd go buy potatoes, and I would, cook potatoes on the camp stove that was there. I would try to get propane for the trailer. I used the plug-in from the contractors at the house to plug power into the trailer. And I was just living like a hurting existence, trying to survive. And, I lived there surviving, eating craft dinner, crackers, potatoes, eggs, scraping together enough for a bottle of propane here and there. And then eventually my dad came by and to check on me to make sure I was okay and said, "Hey, son, do you want to go to a meeting?" And actually I said, "Dad, I want to go to a meeting." He said, "Son, I've been waiting for you to say that for 30 years. And so I went to a meeting with my dad. It was a 12-step meeting, and I never really looked back. And, from that 12-step meeting onward, after I went to my first meeting and I started to get some traction on sobriety, and I basically detoxed in 12-step meetings. And I remember the first meeting I ever went to was in Okotoks, and I wanted to get as far away out of Calgary as I could because I didn't want anyone to know. And like even back when I was when I was working up in Slave Lake, I would Google AA or NA or CA. I would Google these things and I would look and I would see there's meetings, and I tried my hardest to go to a meeting, and I could never go to a meeting. My pride was so fucking scared. I wouldn't do it, man. And I would just succumb, and I'd go buy crack and I'd smoke crack. And so anyway, I'm going to these meetings and people are hugging me and loving on me, and like, I'm just like, whoa, like, what's your problem? Keep your hugs to yourself kind of thing. And like trying to hide out in these meetings, and I don't know why everyone wants to talk to me. Like, I definitely don't want to be talked to, but I just kind of went with the flow. And, before you knew it, it was 2 weeks and I was sober, and I hadn't done any drugs at all. And I was just going to meetings every single day with my dad. I would get up in the morning and go to a morning meeting, and then all day I would go to meetings. And then by, 9 o'clock at night, I was done the meetings and I could go home, and I made it sober. And I did this for a long time. I went to meetings every day, all day, and I would make it home sober. And then eventually, I went to a speaker meeting, and I was like, the speaker meeting, what is this? My dad's like, oh, it's just a guy like you, drug and alcohol addicted guy. And he shares a story and what happened in his life. He's just like you. And I'm like, fuck, this guy doesn't look like how I feel, that's for sure. Anyway, so this guy starts talking and sharing his story at this speaker meeting, and I'm just listening, and I'm just like, wow. He's saying all the things that I feel. He is saying and sharing every emotion, and his anger, his lust, his all of these things that he's sharing, his judgment, his self-worth issues, and then, him drinking or using. And just I related with every single part of this man's story, and his story was so different than mine, but it was the exact same as mine. And then after this guy was done, my jaw was just on the floor. I was in awe of like how this guy presented his story. It was just amazing. And then I kind of nudged my dad and I said, hey, Dad, that guy would be one of those, because I'd heard of sponsors, being around for like that month or two that I was new. I had heard like what a sponsor is or whatever, and elbow my dad. And I'm like, this guy would be one of those good sponsor guys, eh? And he's like, yeah, son, why don't you think about asking him? And I'm like, fuck that. I can't ask him. I'm not asking him. And then with a little coaxing, my dad got me, and I was like, wow, I'm going to ask this guy. And so I walk up to this guy, and I'm just like, hey, my name's Bill, and I was wondering if you would sponsor me. And I couldn't even barely get the words out, eh? And he says, yeah, man, I'll help you. And he was just so nonchalant about it and just gave me his number with no problem. And, I've done a lot of really scary things in my life, being as violent as I am. None of the things in my life was as scary as asking that man for vulnerable help. And he just said yes like it was nothing. And then he gave me the dates and the times to meet him and where to meet him. And I met him at Tim Hortons on 17th Ave in Calgary every Wednesday at 5 o'clock. And the guy just, one line at a time, took me through the big book. And he showed up every week. And I showed up every week. And I made sure I showed up every week. And, I remember us getting to a piece in that book where it said, do you believe in God, or are you willing to believe in God? And I remember thinking, I don't know if I believe in God, but I believe in this guy. Like, I believe in this person, and he keeps showing up for me. So I don't know if I believe in God, but I believe in something, and something's happening, and something's working. So, and I just kept going, and I kept meeting him. And I remember when we got to the third and fourth step, there was something in me that was just like, wow, I'm not just a piece of shit for no reason. There's a reason why I'm a piece of shit. And I can change this. And something deep inside me knew I could change. I just didn't know how to do it yet or anything. But all the way as I walked with my sponsor through all of this material that took many weeks, when we got to that point, I was just like, fuck, there's a way out, man. And I don't know what it looks like, and I didn't even know much about it, but I just had a feeling. So I did that. I finished all my steps. I did my step 5, and I went to a priest or whatever, and he didn't do it with me. My sponsor didn't do it with me. I did do it with a priest or a minister or something. And then, a couple weeks after that 5th step, I just felt like, wow, life's different. And I didn't know that I was changing, but I was changing, right? And then, I keep going, and I'm in my early days of sobriety, and I don't really have any money. I don't really have anything, and, it's probably somewhere around, I don't even know by this point. I come in on March 22nd, and probably being sponsored by May or June. I finished the steps by like September, let's say, and then winter's coming, and I got to move out of this trailer. And through that summer, I remember I was so broke. I had no money at all. And one of the new guys that had been new in recovery at the same time as me, his name was Randy, and him and I kind of bonded together. And one day during the summer, he called me and he said, bro, you're broke like me? And I'm like, yeah, man. He's like, I got an opportunity to make us a little bit of money doing some landscape, and it's cash on the side. I'm like, bro, I'm in. I need some money. He's like, it's probably only going to be like $50 or $100 or something. And I'm like, I don't care, man. I just have like nothing. And so I go and I show up, and I'm late, right? I'm late, and I get the last piece of equipment. And there were some guys that grabbed the lawnmowers, and there's some other guys that grabbed some other weed trimmers, whippersnippers, and I got the last piece of shit whippersnipper. But I didn't care, right? I was just there to make $20 an hour and try to get some pocket money and move on with my life. And I start whippersnippering these yards on a big condo site, and probably going at it for a good hour and doing a good job, I'm pretty sure. And like, I'm the guy that, ran these big man crews. Like, some of the companies that I worked for, there was 200 guys under my supervision, and some of my employees, I ran big crews of men, and here I am being a crew of men underneath some other people and whippersnippering. And then this truck pulls up on this driveway as I'm whippersnippering. And I just think the guy lives at this driveway and didn't think anything of it. And then out of the corner of my eye, I see him like storming over to me. And I'm just like, whoa, what the fuck's going on? This guy just runs over and he rips this whippersnipper right out of my hand. And he says, go fucking sweep. You can't whippersnipper. You're scalping all the lawns. Just go fucking sweep. And just like was so rude and mean to me. And like normally people aren't rude and mean to me because my violence would like act up and I'd punch you out. But I was so scared that I wouldn't get my money that I just kept my mouth shut, and I just went over and I started sweeping over and by where the rest of the people were. And I swept and I swept, and then finally, it was time. It was over. But I was really humiliated. The point is I was so humiliated. And then he decided he was going to pay us, but he was going to pay me and my buddy Randy $100, even though he owed us $200. He was going to pay us $100, and he told me to take it and split it. And he gave that to me at like a Tim Hortons. And I looked at him in the eye like I was going to kill him. And I said, if you don't give me my money, you motherfucker, I'm going to fucking kill you. I said something like that to him. And the fear of God was in this guy's eyes, and he gave us the other $120. And that was the first time I'd gotten angry in a while. But I was seriously angry, and I was serious about wanting to grab him by the throat and do something to him. Because I didn't have real recovery in me yet. I was still pretty new. And so, I just bounced around with these really shitty jobs trying to make ends meet, and the ends weren't meeting very well. And then eventually I was at outside of a meeting one day, and there's another guy in recovery. He had a couple more months than me, and I'm just like, bro, when am I ever going to get a break? Like, fuck, man. Like, I'm so broke, and I'm used to making so much money, and I don't know how I'm ever going to get a job. I feel so useless. I can't get a job. And he reassured me, and he just said, you know what, bro? It's going to happen. You're working hard on your recovery. Just be patient. And I'm just like, fuck, okay, man. What else was my choice, right? And then, I got another job, and this job was, I'm going to go back years and years back first. So when I first started that ground thawing company, I remember in the second winter, I pulled up to a job site, and I saw all these guys who worked for one of the companies I was hired by. These guys did shallow utility work. So they would put the talus and the shaw and the gas and, whatever into the ground at a depth of about 4 to 5 feet. And all the wires that they were putting in had to go inside these 4-inch conduits. These conduit pieces came in chunks, and they were like 20-foot chunks. And then they would stick together end to end. And you had to kind of carry these conduits to the ditch and then glue them together and then throw them in the ditch, and then they'd run the wires or the pipes through. Anyway, this was all winter work. And I remember, because I'm ground thawing, I would get to the site and I'd have to wait for the site superintendent to show up. But I'm watching all these guys work, and they're dragging these pipes in minus 30, 40, 50. And, they're in the ditches shoveling out snow. And, I'm just watching them having so much compassion and feeling so sorry for these guys doing such a shitty job in the middle of winter. Some of these guys weren't young either. And I'm just like shaking my head saying, fuck, thank God I'll never have to do that job. And then I'm 43 years old. I'm in recovery, and I get a call from, one of the companies I used to work for as a contractor, and they call me and say, hey, we want to hire you as an employee and come and do this. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't have any choice because I couldn't get a job. The exact job that I was praying for those guys at is the exact job that I got. So 30 years later, I'm doing the job that I was so grateful I never had to do. And I know Creator was behind all of this. He was behind the whippersnipper, and he's behind this. Because these are all the things that my pride says I'm too good for. These are all the things that I think that I deserve better, or I'm better than that. And Creator's showing me you don't deserve better, and you're not better than that. And how much are you going to show me some humility so that you can do what you need to do to learn your lessons? But at the time I was going through this, I didn't have that thought. I just thought I was just getting the shitty end of the stick. And so I would go to work putting these pipes in the ground, and, got finally into the summer work. But I'm doing this for a while, right? I went from a little bit of winter of doing it into the summer, and I'm enjoying the job because the guys that I worked with were cool. But I hate the actual job. Like, I'm in my 40s, and I'm jumping in and out of ditches, and it's hard on my knees, and, it doesn't even pay very well. I didn't even make enough money to pay my rent. Like, by now I'm living in a little tiny basement suite. I'm not living in the trailer at this point. And my rent was like only like $800 a month, and my child support. Shannon and the girls got a place in Bridalwood for $2,100 a month, and my deal was I would pay the rent, which is basically 20 or $1,050 per each kid. So that's what we agreed on, $1,050 for each kid for child support. But I couldn't make enough money to pay the child support and to pay all the bills that I had and the rent that I had. And so every morning I would wake up to go to this fucking job that I hated. And I would pray and sit at the end of my bed. And I got to paint this picture for you. The apartment that I rented was a basement suite of this guy that my dad knew. And this basement suite did not have its own entrance. You had to walk through the front door of the house, walk through the living room, and then go down the stairwell into the basement suite. And the basement suite was just a basement with a chair in it and one single bed and like a little counter, a fridge, and a hot plate. And then it had a curtain for the laundry room on the other side. So basically, I'm in somebody else's house. I don't even have privacy. I have a single bed. I have a little tiny love seat couch, old piece of shit TV, and a hot plate. And this is my apartment. This is what I'm paying $800 for. I was grateful for it. But wow. Anyway, and every morning I would have to get up at like 4 in the morning because I'd be at work by like 5:30. And I fucking hated getting up that early. And I had a friend that I needed to pick up, so I was always up early. And, I was so discouraged with my life. And yet, recovery had taught me to start being grateful and pray and do all these things that just made no sense really at all. But I would get up and I would do the things that my sponsor told me to do, and I would pray. And I would thank God, and I would do these things, whether I believed it or not. But sure enough, a couple of those mornings I woke up and I was grateful. Even though I wasn't making enough money to pay the bills, I was waking up grateful. And I would go do the job and we'd have laughs, and at least I could come home to a place where I had a roof over my head. And so I started learning, again, through the hard way, because my first house I ever bought was basically, it was $1 million house. My first bedroom that I really had as an adult was a huge master bedroom with an ensuite that me and Shannon shared, right? And so, my big shotism was really getting chopped down by the world, by these jobs, by the treatment of the people from my superiors at these jobs, by the places that I lived, the vehicles that I had to drive. And I just did it because I didn't have another choice. And I tried to do it as happily as possible. And sometimes that was a very tall order because I was not happy. And I had just destroyed my life. So a lot of this stuff was pretty fucking fresh in me. And so I just keep on going to work and doing this job. And then eventually I get a email from this guy that I used to work for as one of his, students of an engineering company. I was one of his apprentices, I guess you could say. And I was a civil construction coordinator for one of the largest engineering firms in the world. And they make the list of the top 500 companies to want to work for in the world. And so I was in civil construction engineer for these guys back when I was still in my addiction. And so he called me and said, hey, there's possibly a job in Morocco. And he doesn't know fully why I even got skidded, right? And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I sent my resume and everything over. And how much does it pay? It pays like $20,000 a month. And I'd have to fly to Morocco and do all this stuff. And so I'm kind of getting my hopes up. I'm finally going to get my career back here, and I'm going to make some fucking money, and I'm going to get back on top of this, because all I really wanted when I came into recovery was get my money back. That was it, man. Let's get my money back. Let's get my house back. Let's get some things back, and let's do this again, but let's not do drugs and lose it all. So I'm kind of moving in that direction. And then within a week, I get another call. And this call is actually from the company that I worked for right before that engineering company where I was making the $8,000 a month. This boss calls me and he's like, hey, I bounced over to this other company. It's called Expert First Nations. And, I think they could really use a guy like you. And so I put your name in. What do you think? And I said, bro, let's go. I said, I have another opportunity, but I'm not going to say no. Like, tell me what it is. And he tells me what it is, right? He says it starts at $75,000, blah, 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 company truck, you're out of town, you're putting housing in First Nations communities, you're site supervisor, so you're going to do a number of different things. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. So anyway, I kind of look at all the options. I got an opportunity to make $20,000 a month, and then this other one is $75,000 a year, which probably comes up to like, I don't know, $4,000 a month, maybe $5,000 a month, something like that. Probably like $5,500 a month. Anyway, and then plus some bonuses. And I'm like, wow, fuck. The smart thing to do is go to Morocco. Like, this isn't even a decision. This is easy. If I get the opportunity to go to Morocco, I'm going. That's bottom line. But something my sponsor had taught me along the way, and other people in 12-step recovery, and was like, you know what, you got to talk these things out, and you just can't make rash decisions, and you can't just go where the money is. You got to really look at the decisions you're making and have other people help you make these decisions. And one of the things that my sponsor emphasized was one of the lines in the book that said, where can I be of maximum service to God and the people about me? And he had asked me that. And so that was kind of stuck in my head as I'm, contemplating these two choices that I have. And I really, really was trying to dig into the program properly and really, really trying to grow and learn. And so I was taking that pretty seriously. And I really prayed on it, and I asked myself, talked to Creator, and said, where can I be of maximum service to you, Creator, and your children? And it was a no-brainer. It was Expert First Nations. And, I don't know how many years sober by now, and I was just starting to want to get in touch with my roots in a more of a deeper way. I'd been sweating for a little while now, but I hadn't really gotten in touch with my roots quite yet. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm going to help these Native people with their housing, and I can help more Native people doing this than I can working for Morocco or whatever that job was. Anyway, it comes down the pipe a week later is Morocco went to somebody else anyway, so I didn't have a chance in getting it. And then I got an offer letter from Expert, and they said, yeah, this is actually what we're going to pay you, and this is what you're going to do, and we want to know if you take the offer. And I said, I take it. And so, I took the smaller amount of pay, and I didn't have a choice anyway because the other one got taken off the table. But I had already made my decision to take the one with smaller pay based on where could I be of maximum service to God's kids and God. And so I just started doing that, and and it went really, really well. I was so good at it because I have a strong construction background, and I understand grades and water and drainage and, all these different components of construction, measurements and lot lines and, straightness of drilling pilot holes and, running equipment because I owned excavators and bobcats and all the attachments and stuff. And I'm kind of just using all my same skills over there, but just in a different way. And so I'm building the lots, I'm scraping the lots, I'm building the roads into the lots. I have kind of guys that are working under me, but they can't run the equipment like I can, so I'm running all the equipment. I'm running screw piles. I'm putting in 70-foot screw piles and torquing them to the specs and logging it and just doing everything. Next thing you know, I can get these piles cut at the right height for the welders to put the plates on, and I know exactly how to build this whole road and what the angles are so that the big, huge trucks that bring the modular houses in. They can just back right up and drop these things. Like, I became a fucking pro at this shit. Like, in a short time, like, I was really, really good at like every aspect of this job. And so I got a raise right away. I was getting my bonuses and things were going good, man. And I was good with, and I was just learning how to become Indian myself. And so I'm dealing with the Indians and nation people and nations. And it was just all working pretty good, man. And then after a year and a half, one of my friends in recovery said, "Hey, man, we want you to come work for us, and we'll sweeten the pot, and we'll give you more money, and you can be in Calgary." And I was dating a woman in Calgary at the time, and she didn't really like me being out of town. And I was like, "Okay, well, what is it? What does it look like?" And next thing you know, I'm given notice to quit that job. And I went over to another company in Calgary, and they were doing coatings, and they offered me a director of operations position where I basically ran the whole Calgary division. And I did it, and I'd never been in coatings before. There were some things I didn't understand or know, but you know what? I figured it out. And the first year that I ran that company, we actually made some money, and they were doing pretty good. And we'd made some changes, and I was doing a good job. And you know, I was proud of it, and I was proud of learning some new traits and some different trades. And next thing you know, they want to give me a raise and they want to keep me. So they bumped me up to like $130K and with some bonuses and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, wow, this is pretty wild, man. And I got some job security and some good things were happening. And then this is kind of where it all changes. And then I'm just sitting there one day. I'm at my desk and I'm doing some work and my computer. And, you know, I was helping alcoholics and addicts get clean and sober all this time, right from the start. And now I'm about 3.5 years in at this job, maybe 4 years in, 3.5, 4 years in. And I got this job as director of operations, and I'm sitting at the computer one day and my phone's right to the side of me like it is here. And I'm just like, something in the little voice in my head says, you can't do this anymore. You can't do this job anymore. And I'm like, the other voice is like, the fuck are you talking about? You can't do this job. You can't sell your soul anymore, man. You got to do something different. You got to help people. That's it. I'm like, there's no money in helping people. I need this job. I got like thousands of dollars a month of bills to pay. Like, I got things I need to do. And I had just bought my first like actual nice car in recovery because I drove such ugly pieces of shit for quite some time. And this voice is just going back and forth in my head, and they're fighting, and I'm like, fuck, I can't do this job. And I knew that voice, that was the one that was real. I knew I couldn't do that job anymore, but I kept trying to rationalize and justify why I should keep doing it, because I was making the money and things were going good, and I just had bought this car. But you know, all these years up to that point of recovery and prayer and meditation and, you know, all of the inner work that I had done, it really cleared me out to have my intuitive thoughts being really honoring those things and listening to what they were saying and doing things differently in many respects, right? And so I just knew that I had to keep praying because I wanted to not leave, but I knew that I couldn't stay. And then one day on my way back to work, I got this intuitive thought to pull my car over. I'm in that Mustang with the sunroof, and I pull it over and I put the seat back and I just lay down and I just start talking to my grandma. And the thing about talking to my grandma is I wouldn't talk to God and I wouldn't talk to Creator because I wasn't Catholic and didn't want to talk to God, so I wouldn't say God, and I wasn't Indian enough or worthy enough to say Creator because only real Indians said Creator, and I was definitely not a real Indian. I was still a facade. I was a fucking phony. And so I kept praying to my grandma. My grandma, who died in 2009, was my higher power for a good number of years. And so I'm talking to Grandma, and I said, Grandma, I know that you're there, and I know that you know that I'm struggling with these things, and that I want to do something different, but I don't know what to do. And, I just want to help people, but there's no money involved, and I don't know what to do, Grandma. And I know you know all this. And then my grandma says to me, just like I'm saying right now, it's like, Billy, it doesn't matter if there's money involved. That's what you do. You go help people. And I was just like, whoa, fuck, that was real. And it was real. And then, of course I didn't get that exact answer that moment, even though that's the message that I got. It took me another couple weeks, and I eventually came to the realization that I had to quit that job. And then what was I going to do? Nothing. I didn't know. I had no idea. But I knew for sure I couldn't do that job. So I put my notice in. And, I put my notice in, and I ended up quitting that job. And then I went on EI. So I'm on EI. And I don't really have a direction, don't really know what I'm doing. And I'm just praying, and I'm meditating, and I'm asking God to guide me and direct me in the direction that He wants me. And I just keep helping people. I keep helping addicts and alcoholics. I keep sponsoring. I keep trying to do whatever it was I needed to do to at least maintain my sobriety and my sanity. And so as I kept going, I was hitting all these meetings. I got my $800 or $900 a month coming in, and I'm hitting all these meetings. And one of the meetings I hit was over here by 14th Street and 15th Ave Southwest, and it was a nighttime meeting on Thursdays. And I used to go there for quite some time, and because I often speak of God at the meetings, I really connected with this really different guy. We'll call him B. B was a real estate agent, and he was like super connected to the Catholic religion, and he really loved God. And, him and I would like really celebrate, God in our lives. His God was different than mine, but we were both in 12-step recovery, and we both believed so much in our own gods. And that was kind of what bonded us and brought us together. And, me and B would see each other here and there over the months and months. And finally, after I had quit my job, and, I started coming to that meeting and I saw him, and I sat down, and he sat beside me, and I was like, hey, what's going on? Let's catch up. What have you been up to? So he kind of fills me in on what he's been up to. And then he asked me, and I said, well, I just quit my career and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, holy, why? And then I just told him the straight goods. I said, it's kind of eating my soul, and I don't really want to do it, and I don't know what I want to do. But in the same breath, bro, I want to help people, but I just don't know exactly what it looks like. And he was like, no way, that's wild. And I said, yeah, I just want to figure out a path to, find my purpose and keep helping people. He's like, wow, bro, that's wild. He's like, what's really cool about this? And I'm like, what? He's like, I just built a program called the 5 Phases to Destiny. And it's a Christian-based program that I'm going to put together, and I'm going to use it to try to do some things in the world and blah, blah, blah. He's like, I've got it all developed, except I haven't really tried it out on anybody. And he's like, if you want to try it out, you can be the first, and we'll work together and see what we can help you find for your phase to destiny. And I'm like, okay, wow, this sounds really cool. So anyway, I did the things that he asked me to do. And one of the things that he asked me to do was, I think this was actually our very first meeting. Yes, it was. We hadn't met yet, but after that meeting at the, 12-step meeting, we had made a plan to meet up and talk about some things. And it was New Year's Eve on probably 2019, which is about right because it was about 4 years after my sobriety. So that's about right. So it was New Year's 2019. I had asked for my native name on that New Year's Eve, even though I had given the elder notice like 3 or 4 months earlier, and I didn't know he was going to give me my spirit name that night at that sweat, but he did. And that sweat went extra long. That ceremony went extra long. And my original plan for that night was to meet B at his office at approximately 6 or 7 o'clock at night on New Year's Eve. But I didn't even get out of the sweat lodge till 7 or 8. And then we had to eat. And then I got my name. And by the time I'm back to Calgary, it's like pushing like 11:30 at night. And I'm driving at 10:30 on my way going, shit, I know I kind of let him down. And so I messaged him and he's like, no worries, bro. Don't worry about it. Just meet me at my office and we'll get started. And I'm like, okay, I thought he would cancel, but he didn't cancel. So I drove to his office over by Chinook. I found a parking spot. I went in and it was just me and him. You got to realize it's New Year's Eve. So it's just me and him. And he says, come on in. And, I know B, but I don't like really know B. I've seen him at meetings for like a year and a half. But I've never really spent any time with the guy, so I don't know him. So anyway, I go into, he says, come in here, and we go into this little real estate office, and he's like, yeah, just sit down. And so I sit down, and we shoot the shit there for a little bit, and then he's like, okay, I'm going to do something. I'm like, what? He's like, I just want you to sit in this chair, and it was one of those chairs with roller wheels on it, black high back chair. And he says, I'm going to get you to look at that. You see that spot on the wall? I'm like, yeah. He's like, just look at that and just stare at it. And he's like, I'm gonna move your chair around a bit. And I'm like, okay. So I start staring at this spot on the wall, and he comes to the back of the chair, kind of like where the handles meet the vertical part of the stair. And he grabs it there and he starts shaking me. Starts shaking me in this chair and rolling me around on the wheels and like so back and forth and all over. And I'm just like, whoa, this is wild. And the one thing that I totally did know is that I was going to keep my eye on that spot. And he's just shaking and he's saying all this crazy stuff. And I'm watching the spot on the wall and I'm not taking my eyes off it. And it's all so weird. He's just shaking this chair and I'm just sitting there and he's saying all these things and this is what life's going to be like. This is what your passion's going to be like. This is what it's going to take for you to follow the path that you need. And there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. There's going to be a lot of distractions. And he's like, you just keep your eye on the spot. And I'm just like, whoa, yeah, okay. And this went on for like 5 minutes straight. And then it was all over. And I was just like, whoa, that was trippy. And I barely even know this guy, honestly. And then he sits down on the other side of the table. And I think he was a little bit embarrassed, thinking that was a lot. And it was a lot. But the thing that he didn't understand is, bro, I'm all in. Like, I knew that this was part of whatever this destiny mission was. And that I'm not thinking that he's weird, man. I'm thinking that this is fucking the deal. Let's go. And so once he was, confident that I was confident, like, we just went for it, man. And that was the first interaction I ever had with him. And then from there, he just did. I was his skinny pig, man. He said, go buy these $500 headphones with the laser shield and you're going to get this app and you're going to start listening to these sound frequencies and this is what you're going to do. And I did that shit. He's like, you're going to get these block breaker codes. I'll get the documents and you just make sure you do them every night. And it was just these 7 or 8 different things that I had to do every night over and over and over with my fingers together and pointing at my eyes and my nose and my throat and my ears and then saying these sayings over and over and over. And I did that shit. I nonstop, like religiously every single day and night I did that stuff. And, he's like, we're going to do a reverse step 4. We're going to look at all your assets. You're going to do a strength-based leadership. And you know what? You tell me how high to jump, bro, and I'm jumping. And he would send me emails and da-da-da-da-da. Like, I just did everything he asked. And it started working, man. Some stuff started working. I was growing again. I was changing. The steps had done a lot. This is doing a lot. My sponsor work was doing a lot. Like, a lot of things were working itself out here. And while I was seeing B, I would still go to these meetings. And one of the meetings I would go to, my home group, I was always like a sharer that would, just say the truth. And because at 4 years in, I had helped so many people, I had a really good take on what it took to help people and kind of what worked and what wasn't. And I had sponsored way more people than most people in 12-step recovery by that point. And so I had like earned the right a little bit to maybe say some of the stuff, but just the way that I said it was sometimes not, the most diplomatic. And so I had a lot of like haters or people that would cross talk me, cross share me. And, it was kind of a difficult time at times, but I didn't really care. And I knew that I was in my passion and nothing was really going to shake me off. But anyway, I remember I was at this one meeting one day and I did my thing and I shared. And after the meeting, this Jay guy comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, bro, I just want to talk to you and let you know, like, you don't have to cater to anybody." He's like, "I haven't seen messages like yours here in a long time." And he's like, "I think you're bang on and don't let anyone tell you elsewise because people are going to come at you and they're going to try to discourage you from saying what it is that you're saying." And he says, I'm telling you to don't change. He's like, "You got a powerful message and there's something special about you. And I just want you to know that and don't change." And I'm thinking, well, I wasn't really planning on changing anyway, but I really appreciated what he said. And it took the time to, let me know what he thought. And I just really, really respected that and give me a little validation also to know that I'm on the right path. And, I kept going to this meeting and kept doing the stuff with B and kept doing my regular stuff. And next thing you know, it's been like 4 months since that last meeting with Jay, and he comes to me again and he's like, "Hey, bro, just again, I just want to let you know you're on the right track and your message is powerful and I think you're really going to help your people one day." And I'm like, "Help my people? Bro, I'm not even Indian myself. Yeah, I'm brown, but I don't feel Indian. I don't even say the word creator." He's like, "That you don't need to worry, man." He's like, "Your influence as a recovery person and just how you are." And he's like, "You don't need to worry about it. Just go with the flow, man, and just don't bite onto anyone's pride that's trying to tempt you to say that you're on the wrong path because you're on the right path." He's like, "I really think that you could do some damage in the world with this as a business or as something." And, I'd already been thinking, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so I was already thinking kind of along those lines. And one of my most famous sayings that I say is, when you work for God and his kids, God and his kids work for you. And I really believe that. So I try to work for God and his kids, and then Creator shows me, what he can do for me that I couldn't have done for myself. And it comes through the work that we do on the front end. And so he said, "You know what? These nations that are all over Canada, and, I have experience working up there and doing the things that I do. And it's just, as a result that I do what I do, that I've been able to see so many nations." He's like, I actually see that you're so powerful, you'll be able to help a lot of these nations. And you're probably going to speak at the United Nations, and why not? And so, that felt really, really cool too. And next thing you know, I'm just digging it. I'm just kind of in the flow. And I don't even know what I'm doing. And I ain't working. I ain't making any money. I'm just helping people.